Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the ReluTech Podcast. I am very excited today to be joined by Mark Wuerslin at EPI-USE and Brian Benavides at Truelio. Mark and I both, so EPI-USE is another AWS partner, and we recently have worked together on a project helping Truelio, Brian's company, get to the cloud. So I wanted to welcome them here today. Very excited to have both of you on.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
So we'll start with some introductions. Brian, tell us a little more about yourself. Tell us a little more about Truelio.
Yeah, so I'm Brian Benavides. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at Truelio. We're a brand experience agency in Norcross, Georgia. We help companies enhance every moment of their customer interactions so they aren't just meeting their expectations and they're creating lasting impressions.
Excellent. And recently, Brian has begun the journey to the cloud with the initial migration. Post that part of the journey, that's where Mark and EPI-USE's team are coming in to make sure that there is a seasoned hand to guide them along that way. Mark, introduce yourself and tell us a little more about EPI-USE.
Thanks, Chris. I'm Mark Wuerslin. I'm Director of Sales on AWS at EPI-USE, services for AWS. We help business and technical leaders manage and modernize their applications and workloads on AWS so they can really focus on their business and frankly, sleep well at night. So providing, the whole boutique services from the initial assessment, migration to managing it 24/7, and then helping modernize and grow past that.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in. I feel like the first time anyone logs into AWS, they look at all the services in that console and their jaw drops a little bit. The one that always got me was the ground control one where I'm like, I can talk to satellites? Oh, I got to get that going. And I saw the pricing and I decided we'll do it later. So getting a little bit into this. So tell me a little more, Brian, about, I guess, how we met. Let's start there, because I do find this to be a kind of interesting story. I feel like a lot of sales these days is emails, cold calling, the classic LinkedIn message. Yeah. How did our team meet you?
It was a little unique. We have a local bar real close to the office, and my CEO was there, and John Kaufman, he was there having lunch. I don't think he was having any Pinot or anything at that moment, but he was having lunch, and he was talking to a complete stranger, as he does, about projects we're working on, and he happened to be mentioning my migration ambition at that moment to someone who was completely uninterested. Fortunately, however, there was Ryan Kaywood, I think a couple booths away, listening in, and as soon as the random stranger that was listening to John left, Ryan swooped in and said, well, this is what we do. Introduced himself, handed over a business card. Ryan and I had a call, and the rest was history there.
Yeah, and I find that to be an interesting story just because, as I said, sales has become a pretty typical game for how a lot of people meet. Salespeople, go talk to people out in public. It is an option. And, things can actually happen sometimes. As surprised as I was when I found out, wait, you found a migration in a bar? Very cool. So I guess kind of going on from that note there, when you were interested in the migration that you brought up to John, I guess, what was motivating you to feel like Truelio needed to get into the cloud?
Yeah, so we were on something that I would consider an on-prem solution or some kind of hybrid. It was becoming dated. We had already upgraded all the hardware once before. We were twice at this point, and though we were considering our third upgrade of the hardware. It was going to be a significant investment, and we weren't seeing the returns that we expected. I started exploring all the different cloud options and started interviewing different partners to help us with migration. And I quickly saw that there was definitely cost optimizations we could be making by doing the migration. So I made my pitch to the leadership, and we were on our way.
Nice. And yeah, as far as that goes, I think that's something a lot of people run into when they are running that on-prem kind of setup. You're in that still OpEx kind of spending fashion where it's buying hardware, it's supporting that hardware, whether it be the hardware you own and support associated. There's a lot of kind of time that you're locked into there, and it doesn't let you be light on your feet, which for anyone trying to modernize and keep up with the market, that can be tricky. So, your story there, it's something that I'm sure we've heard plenty of times. I'm sure Mark has as well. It's a common thing. People are like, I feel like I need more flexibility. This modern world, there's so much I can do, and I feel kind of trapped by our current setup a little bit, let alone the fact that you look how much it costs, and you're like, there's got to be a better way. And this is called economies of
Right.
scale. That's why the cloud's there.
Yeah.
Now, going past that, one thing I always like to know is, when someone picks us to work with, I guess why, I know we met you guys and were able to make our pitch, but why did you guys end up deciding to go with us for the migration?
I would say that, ReluTech was probably one of 3 or 4 different partners that we had been dealing with at the time. But one of our big priorities that we needed to have a detailed project plan to put in front of our clients. We work with large banks and airlines, some of the biggest in the world, and they won't let us do a single tech project without having a detailed project plan with the delivery timelines and what the requirements are going to be from their end as well as ours. That's one thing we got immediately from ReluTech. As soon as we had an in-person meeting, you guys had it all drawn out. Other partners, potential partners, were not that detailed.
So that's the note right there, guys. Figure out exactly what kind of timeline people are working with and the plan that they need in place to make sure it works and there's no, poor change management, so to speak. Because if you're working for a client, obviously their technology is important to them, but it also might support their clients, which no idea how impactful that can be to how their business operates. So glad to hear that was what pushed the needle there. I'll make sure that our sales team knows it over here. So, make good plans when you're trying to sell. Now, we've talked a lot about the migration a little bit. Mark, we introduced you early on in the conversation, but we haven't talked too much about where EPI-USE comes into this equation. Let's get more into that. So EPI-USE, as you mentioned, you guys are a premier partner here at AWS. You guys are doing all sorts of stuff from modernization, and you guys actually do migrations. So
Yes, we do.
this is business you could have potentially gone for. I think we found it first. We were the early fishermen out on the lake. But there was a reality that we faced. We've been in the AWS space for a while. There's things we do. There's things we don't do. And when you're moving your stuff to the cloud, it's first step's moving it. But like Brian said, he wants to optimize it. That's why a lot of people go to the cloud. So once you've moved it, you want to then think, okay, now how can I be flexible once I get there? So Mark, explain kind of the plan that you guys have in place, kind of, what your relationship's going to be with Truelio going forward.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. I think starting just with the ReluTech, we're partners with ReluTech, taking some of your hardware services for our migration clients, and then that helps alleviate costs over the double bubble getting into the cloud, because a lot of getting to the cloud is about not just cost optimization takeout; it's actually reallocating costs, making sure you're spending it correctly and optimized. So you might. Brian, you were looking at 3 to 5 year decision on hardware, whereas then you can go to consumption based. But if you were to lift everything and just put it in the cloud, it'd probably be more expensive. So what we try to do when we're taking clients into the cloud is get them in a position where they're spending that optimally, maybe choosing the right technologies. So what we did with, in conjunction with ReluTech is really help kind of provide some advisory support during that migration to say, okay, we're going to be taking this on as a managed services client to help Brian just sleep better at night. We're going to run the base infrastructure management. So what we work together to kind of say, let's tweak these things, make sure they're right so we can manage them effectively. And then, once Brian's fully in the cloud, our strategy is basically to help to run it effectively to where Brian can get the cost efficiencies of the cloud, make sure he's right-sized on his resources and choosing the right resources. So for some of that is taking some of the legacy things that he brought over and then tweaking them or changing them to maybe a different service, or maybe choosing the right savings plans so he's getting the best cost out of it. So instead of paying on-demand cost, he's actually saying, well, I can commit to this base level of service. It's going to save you a lot. So we're working on all sorts of different areas of the cloud and helping him guide him as that partner.
Yeah, I mean, like you said there, when you get to the cloud, it can be more expensive if everything's running the exact same. You haven't changed anything. Then towards the end there, you mentioned, maybe we can make these commitments and we can get better pricing. That's really where that economies of scale the cloud creates from these massive data centers that Amazon manages starts to pass down to the customer. When you're able to figure out how much I need and how I can negotiate that with Amazon. And that's where the experts come in, because it is a pretty complicated space. So that's why there's partners like EPI-USE to come in and help with that. Now, Brian, I am curious, when it came to choosing EPI-USE, you explained why you picked us, but we introduced, I think, to a few partners to you as people who
Yep.
offer similar types of services for this. We wanted you guys to have some options. What led you to choosing EPI-USE?
So in addition to the ones that you had recommended, I did talk to a few others as well. But the thing that really stood out, and I think Mark, I've shared this with you, is when you showed up with Cyril, and having somebody with that level of knowledge. Everybody showed up and they were talking about taking me to play golf and let's go, get lunch here, dinner there, whatever. But having a SME there that could answer any question, which at that point I really didn't have too many because I didn't know much about AWS at that point. But knowing that EPI-USE thought ahead to bring their best foot forward was really what cemented that decision for me.
So the note to salespeople is come prepared. Have a plan for how you're actually going to help the customer. That is, golf is great. Have fun, play golf,
Yeah.
and bring a SME with you.
Yep.
No, that's excellent, and I like to hear it. As far as it goes, for our company, and I know a lot of the partners we work with, like EPI-USE, we are trying to make sure that the value is what we do, our experience in this space, how long we've been in, the credibility that lends itself. So, love to hear that. Now, Brian, you are new to the AWS space, so you had a pretty big pilgrimage this year, so to speak, for any AWS user, the pilgrimage to reInvent. For anyone who's been watching the show, we actually did a podcast a few episodes ago about two of our PSMs at our company going to reInvent for the first time. Crazy event for them because obviously they're trying to meet with every AWS rep they know, every customer they know, and just, putting in 50,000 steps a day and whatever else. Tell us about it. What got you excited about what made you decide to go to reInvent, and how was it?
The reason I wanted to go was that I saw that there was a big opportunity for learning. I knew that we didn't have that type of knowledge on staff. So I asked one of my engineers to come along with me, and we took the AWS crash course. I can't remember the exact name. It was like a boot camp, just all day long, learning about all the services they had to offer. It was exhausting, but extremely enlightening. I would say I loved the entire AWS experience, but it was probably maybe a little overwhelming. And I definitely have to go back because there was no way I was going to do everything. And as Amazon does, is they're going to change everything up and have new services and products that we'll take advantage of. But it was a great experience. My engineer loved it, and he probably did more sessions than I did, and came back with a bunch of fresh ideas that he's already playing around in the sandbox in AWS.
And see, I love that contrast to the conversation I had with our sales folks who went over to reInvent, just because it's a very different experience. They're trying to understand more about, the AWS business strategy for the upcoming year, how customers fit into that strategy, and have the right conversations around that. But obviously, when it comes to what customers really value while they're out there, they want to use these tools to the best of their ability. Sure, partners are going to help them do that, but they want to understand it too. I take my car to a mechanic, but I kind of like to know what's going on under the hood sometimes. So it's awesome you went out there. As far as that goes, it's something I've never been to reInvent. I've done a few of the summits. reInvent has a slightly higher price tag, so that's one I've held off on for a few years. But it's one I might go to in the next year or two. We've been talking about it internally at my company, and it's an event that for anyone who is established in the AWS space and is looking for good ideas to take their company to the next level in that space, it's a must attempt. So can't recommend that enough. To cap off the conversation, let's look to the future a little bit. Obviously, Mark talked about how they're going to help you come in, start optimizing. I guess past some of the immediate plans, what are, I guess, some of the immediate plans for how you're looking to optimize? And I guess what are some of the things you may be more excited about in your future in this AWS journey? Some things that might be a little more nascent right now.
Yeah. Probably one of our biggest things is figuring out how to modernize our approach to the applications that we deliver. And like Mark mentioned before, it's not about just saving money, but it's more about reallocating those funds. So I would love to take the savings potentially that we're going to realize and reinvest them into enhancing our services and going away from our slightly dated architecture and upgrading and making use of all of Amazon's services.
Yeah, and that's a huge thing. If you're saving money, that means you get to put it somewhere else. And it could be in other Amazon services. It could be in other aspects of your business. But Yeah, the cost optimization, I think, is one of the big first things that people do in AWS. And sorry, I think you had something else there?
No, I was just gonna give some kudos to Mark and his team because they've been already pushing us in the right direction, and I have a bunch of tickets from changes that we need to make and things that we need to explore in AWS to fully take advantage of what's available to us.
Love to hear it. And obviously, I've been coordinating with Mark the last few weeks, but talking to Cyril the few times I have, he's a sharp guy.
Yeah, thanks. I would just want to add, Brian, about your journey to AWS and specifically reInvent, because when we first started this journey, you were asking a lot of terms of what is service is that, what does that mean, and curiously so. And then once you got to AWS, you really dove in with 2 feet, and I think that's real key for a client of ours who goes to the cloud. The most successful ones are the ones who do their homework, who learn and dig in, because the world's your oyster on the platform. There's so many services and ways of architecting. You have to own that as well, because your business the best. We're going to be an advisory resource and support you, but the most successful clients are those who really dive in and learn and figure out that new way of thinking and building their applications and their businesses. So kudos to you guys.
Yeah,
thanks, Mark.
It's like a gym membership. You can show up every day, but you got to try hard, and a little personal training doesn't hurt.
You got to use it.
Showing up's the hardest part sometimes. But no, seriously, since we've been talking to you guys, when I heard you were going to reInvent, and it sounds like you're taking this seriously, and I am certain it's going to pay big dividends in the long run.
Oh, definitely. We're already seeing it. So
excellent. Love to hear it. Well, as it goes, we're reaching the end of our episode. Mark, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this is a podcast, one of the most excited I've been about one. I don't like to say a favorite, but it's up there. We're talking a top 5 here because for here at ReluTech, we work with a lot of different partners, and we do pride ourselves on that because sometimes in these types of partner spaces, there can be a lot of competition. EPI-USE and us both do cloud migrations in different capacities, and it's something where we found over time that the best outcomes for the customers tend to be when we kind of put that aside and bring people in when they have strengths, make introductions, build bridges, and just do right by the customer. Because that is typically Amazon's mantra, to be customer obsessed. So we were glad to have you on here today, Brian, to talk a little more about that. And I'm super happy you're enjoying the cloud journey so far.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all our viewers, and tune in for future episodes. We're looking forward to it.